Hey guys, alright, let us continue this lovely, lovely morning in Rockinjima, where only the best, most happiest things happen. Oh, I'm exhausted. Something's gotta go right this morning, right? There's gotta be some good news. We can't just have endless strings of despair and sadness. That's wishful thinking. It's not gonna happen. We know it's not gonna happen. It's not gonna happen. Alright, maybe we'll find Kinzo. See what he's up to. He's up to something. We know he's up to something. Maria is crazy. I mean, half the people are crazy, but Maria is really crazy. And Kinzo is sneaking off to somewhere. Let's find out where. After that, we ate the breakfast Kumasawa-san had made, which felt dry and tasteless. Of course, this was right after something like that had happened. No one felt particularly hungry. Of course not. However, we understood logically that not eating would weaken our bodies. It would also be rude to Kumasawa-san, who had made the breakfast. Kumasawa-san had taken some unusual Western vegetables, ones that Goda-san had probably ordered for his ultra-elaborate meals, and cooked them in a Japanese style. What are these unusual Western vegetables, I wonder? Which made them turn an unpleasant color. As to what Goda-san had been planning to cook with those ingredients, right then I couldn't even imagine it. If I did think about it, I'd be reminded of the way Goda-san died, and a sour taste would fill the inside of my mouth. We'll never be able to have that wonderful cooking ever again. It's gone. It's the only thing Goda was good for, because he was kind of a dick in every other way. Everyone pretended to eat for the time being, but of course, no one made much progress. Then we began pooling our knowledge of the current situation. Alright, yeah, let's talk about what we know. First off, 6 people, which included Uncle Kraus, my dad, Kari-san, Aunt Rosa, Goda-san, and Shannon-chan, had been found in the Rose Garden storehouse as brutally mutilated corpses. And yet, we still couldn't contact the police, since both the phones and the radio were unusable. So until the typhoon passed, there was nothing we could do. Furthermore, grandfather, who we might have hoped would be able to show a little leadership in this kind of situation, had disappeared some time ago. Goda-san hadn't made breakfast, so grandfather's stomach must have been empty. And if he had just been taking a casual walk, we should have been able to hear him whining about how hungry he was by now. And despite that, he hadn't appeared. There was more than a small chance that he'd gotten caught up in this crime. Or, started it. According to my aunts, on their way back from Kinzo's study, they'd searched for him, called out on every floor, but were unable to find him. That's why they took a while, I guess. Considering the timing of it all, it's only reasonable to assume that this disappearance had something to do with the crime. Yeah. We figured Dad and the rest were probably killed in the dining hall, and then painstakingly removed to the storehouse. So maybe Grandfather has already been killed, and dragged to some strange place, which we simply haven't discovered yet. I don't think so. I think the 6 for this twilight are done, and you're safe for the very immediate time being. No one actually said it out loud, but this theory seemed extremely convincing.
私たちはお屋敷の戸締まりを確認してきます。
Out of curiosity. Alright. So we've seen the 6 chosen by the key as sacrifices. First twilight. So on the second twilight, those who remain shall tear apart the 2 who are close. Now this is interesting. Those who remain implies that whatever's going to happen is going to happen by everyone who's left to 2 people. Who are the 2 that are closest right now? Genji Cannon, Kumasawa, Nanjo. I mean, the only 2 I can think of that, match that are either the fact that Natsuhi and Jessica have just started, like, making amends and just started, but they're still, like, really distant. That's, like, a big stretch to say they're close. Maybe Ava and Hideyoshi tear apart the two that are close. Like I said, I originally thought that was going to be George and Shannon. I thought that's who it was implying would be part of the second Twilight. But that's not the case, obviously. And it can't be like Rosa or Maria either, who I'd say would, two that are close. Yeah, I mean, probably Ava and Hideyoshi would be my best guess. But that would imply that everyone else here are going to tear them apart, and I don't understand why that would be. Maybe I'm not even looking at it in the right way, and this isn't really how I should be thinking about it, but that's just my best guess right now.
お父様も念入りに探さなければなりません。子供たちはこの部屋を出ないように。エヴァさんと秀吉さんは申し訳ありませんが、ここで子供たちと一緒にいてください。
Really? Like, not even... I feel like people like George are old enough to help. Not like a high schooler.
南條先生もお願いいたします。
You're just having everyone stay. It's just you, Cannon, and Genji then? And she's probably not going to have Kumasawa run around, right?
わかりました。ここでお待ちしています。
Aunt Natsuhi followed the servants, Genji-san, Kumasawa-san, and Cannon-kun out of the parlor. Okay, because Kumasawa will be helping. All that was left was Aunt Ava, Uncle Hideyoshi, Dr. Nanjo, and the four of us children, a total of 7 people. So there are 11 left, unless we find Kinzo, which will make 12. Right, because it was 18 and we lost 6. Yeah, that makes sense.
みんなで仲良くテレビでも見て待ってよな。しかし日曜日の午前中はろくな番組やっとらへんな。
Find a nice infomercial or something. Uncle Hideyoshi started acting cheerfully, trying to brighten up this gloomy atmosphere. I don't know what to think of you, Maria. You really weirded me out lately.
お、そうか。マリアちゃんはテレビ見るか。
I mean, that's all she's been doing.
じゃ、おじさんと一緒に見ような。
You've been watching on TV all morning. Maria was the only one who joined in. Even though Maria had been told of her mother's death, she didn't show even the slightest flicker in her emotions. Like, weird as fuck. Was it really normal for a 9-year-old girl like Maria to act so much like a very young child? Just going right back to the ooze, huh? The bad habit. Something that might be okay in kindergarten, but not for a 9-year-old. Like implying that she doesn't even understand the gravity of the situation. But she does. The way she like switched to talking about like how many died. There's something going on with her, obviously. Everyone else's mood failed to improve, and they each sank absent-mindedly into the sofas.
兄貴、聞いていいか。なんだい。さっき倉庫で兄貴はシャノンちゃんの指輪の話をしたよな。あれ送ったのは兄貴か。
George Aniki didn't answer, but he hung his head and closed both of his eyes. There could be no clearer response.
よせよパトラ。
Yeah, this is a weird time to talk about that.
少しは察しろよ。
だな。悪いことを聞いたぜ。
I don't think you should have, no.
そうさ。
Oh boy.
僕だよ。彼女に昨べ求婚したんだ。その時指輪を渡した。明日になったらそれを好きな指にはめて返事としてくれって気ざったらしいことを言ってね。
And that ring had been on the ring finger of Shannon Chan's left hand.
私さ、数年前からシャドウに相談を受けてたぜ。ジョージ兄さんのことでさ。
なんて言ってたのかな。
シャノンは嘘をつくのが下手だったからよ。ジョージ兄さんのことを言ってるのはすぐにバレバレでさ。自分は使用人の身分だけど親しくしてもいいのだろうかとか、男の人の好きそうなものは何かとか、どういう服を着たら喜ぶかとか、そんなことをいろいろとさ。なんつうのか、そのまあ焼けたぜ。
それが婚約指輪を渡されておしまいかよ。
価値観は人それぞれだけどよ、男から求婚されるってのは人生の到達点なんだと思うんだよ。だからきっと昨夜のシャノンは
Yeah.
心の底から、いや生まれてから今までの中で一番幸せだったと思うぜ。
Oh, poor George.
シャノンは昨べゲストハウスの当番だったらしいんだ。でもシャノンは僕と一緒にゲストハウスに帰るのを恥ずかしがってお屋敷に行ってしまった。
Oh, don't blame yourself. Please
シ
don't
ャ
do
ノ
that.
ンの気持ちを察しろよ。
Don't say like if I hadn't done this, she would have stayed in the guest house and then.
婚約指輪をもらえばどんなに予告されてたって普通は舞い上がっちまって頭は真っ白になっちまうぜ。気恥ずかしくて仕方なかったんだろうよ。
それでシャノンは当番でないはずのお屋敷へ行き、
Oh boy, here we go.
そこで郷田さんの仕事を手伝い事件に巻き込まれてしまった。僕が
Yeah, saw that coming.
あの日あの場所で指輪なんか渡さなければシャノンはサヨは事件に巻き込まれなかったんだ。
You really can't think of it that way. That's like I understand why people do that to
兄貴
themselves. But that's just not how things work.
それだけは違うぜ。断じて違う。だからそれ以上泣くんじゃねえ。
バトラー君、そっとしてあげなさい。
That's a very kind, non-smug smile from Aunt Ava. I'm really not used to seeing her like that. That's different. I don't know if we've seen it before, or I've just gotten so used to the smug that I've forgotten that it exists. That she can be something other than a smug jerk. After Aunt Ava said that, I stopped talking to him. Misplaced words of comfort might actually do more harm than good. Jessica sat down next to Anarchy and put an arm around him. Maybe only Jessica, who had known about Anarchy and Shannon's love since the beginning, and who had even discussed that relationship with Shannon, could come for Aniki now. I went over to Aunt Eva and sat down on the opposite sofa.
バトラ君は強いわね。もうだいぶしっかりしているように見えるわよ。
I mean, Battler lost more than anyone. Everyone else lost like one. Well, I mean, if the siblings cared more about each other and they actually loved each other as brothers and sisters, then I would say that, you know, Ava lost the most because she literally just lost all three of her siblings. But with the way they treat each other, I don't think... I don't know. Well, then again, I mean, Battler hardly cared about his dad. Well, so he says, but, I mean, he was pretty broken up there at the end. It's hard to say who, like, suffered the most, the biggest impact from this. I'd probably say Maria if she actually was, like, showing a bit of emotion right now, but it's not the case.
まあそのほら愛の深さが傷の
But
深
yeah,
さじゃ
yeah,
ないで
he's
すか
saying, yeah, can't be too broken up over something that you didn't care about in the first place.
あんなクソ親父どうしのうが知ったことじゃないし
But you're hiding it.
キリエさんは気の毒ですがまあ本当の親ってわけじゃないですしね
You feel worse than you're letting on.
あらという割にはさっきすっごく大泣きしてたわよ。
Yeah, we all saw it. You can't
まあ
pretend.
育ての親に対する恩はあのくらい泣けば OK かと思い
Oh,
ま
it's
して
just obligation, was it?
そのあたりの切り替えの速さやドライなあたりは本当にルドルフ譲りね。あの子は昔から激しく喜んだり悲しんだり怒ったりしたけれどすぐにケロリと平静を取り戻したわ。
そんなことはないっすよ俺だってまだまだ心のショックから立ち
I'm
直れ
sure
ちゃいませ
everyone's
ん
in shock.
ただ俺がみんなと違うのはそれによってどういう感情が生み出されるかってことだと思います
What does that mean?
どういうこと？
I've been acting much calmer than George, Aniki, and Jessica. That wasn't because my sadness was any less intense, or because I'd already recovered. What was this song? I don't recall this one either. But then again, a lot of these songs only get played, have only been played like once or twice, and then I think I haven't heard them before, but I really just don't remember them because they've only been played so few times. My sadness was simply getting replaced gradually with a different emotion. Oh,
悲しいっていうよりは
you getting mad?
腹立たしいって気持ち
Oh,
なんですよ
that's fun. Yeah, hell
どこ
yeah.
のドイツがこんなことをしやがったのか
Let's go for revenge, man.
横っ面に一発お見舞いしてやらないことには腹の虫が収まらねえんです
Battler versus Beatrice. Let's go. Fist fight. That was what I really wanted to do. I couldn't forgive myself if I just sat there, overwhelmed with sadness and hugging my knees.
親父たちが殺されて以降この島は台風に包まれたままです
I mean, yeah, it's been like... Oh, well, since they were killed, okay. Yeah, it's been like
つまり
almost 12 hours.
これ
10
だけの
maybe.
上等を決めてくれやがった野郎はまだこの島の中にいるってことです
そういうことになるわね。今も暗い森のどこかに身を潜めているのかしら。
I felt like I'd had a very similar conversation with Kitty-san the night before. Oh yeah, that's right. After the letter from the person claiming to be Beatrice appeared at the dinner table last night, we talked about whether or not a 19th person actually exists.
エヴァおばさん
I'm sure he seems certain now, because he wouldn't imagine that anyone in the family did this.
この殺人昨べのベアトリーチェの手紙と 何か関連があるんでしょうかね。
For sure.
ああ、例のさあ、どうかしらね。あの手紙はお父様が遺産問題に絡みたくて出した怪文書という見方で兄弟は一致したんだけれども、それと今朝の事件に関係があるかは今の段階では分かりかねるわね。
I wonder how Ava feels right now. I mean, her entire time on this island so far has been you're fighting with her other siblings about the inheritance, and now all three of them are just gone. I don't know if maybe she feels a bit of guilt over how she spent her time, her last bit of time with her siblings, or maybe she's extra cold and she's looking at it in a positive way where there's less competition now. I don't know. It's hard to tell how cold she is sometimes. She's very mean sometimes. We don't really get to see much of a nicer side to her. Well, I guess most of that meanness is just directed towards Natsuhi alone. So maybe I'm just taking it personally. She is actually usually nice to everyone else, so I don't know.
あの手紙、本当にベアトリーチェなんて魔女がマリアに渡したんすかね。
まさか
Must.
全部お父様の仕組んだ茶番でしょ。シャノンちゃんあたりに肖像画のドレスを着させてマリアちゃんを騙したんでしょ。
I mean, that is a big assumption. It's obviously much more likely than a supernatural witch.
お父様らしい手の込みすぎたいたずらだと思うけど。
If you don't know what kind of story you're in.
ゆうべキリエさんとベアトリーチェは実在するんだろうかって話をしたんですけど、キリエさんも俺たち18人の中にベアトリーチェがいるだろうと言ってましたね。
Right.
そんなの当然じゃない。この島には私たちしかいないのよ。
You
な
don't
ら
know
私
that.
たちの中の誰かがベアトリーチェを語ったに決まってるじゃない。
この島には俺たち以外はいないっすか。
当然でしょ。私たち以外の誰がここにいるっていうの。この島には私たちしかいない。18人しかいない。ならベアトリーチェを語るのも18人の中の誰かしかいないじゃない。
Kitty-san denied the existence of a 19th person by spinning the chessboard around, right? Even though Aunt Ava hadn't constructed an argument that complicated, her opinion was at least the same. Except, if that's the case, our situation starts to look very ugly. Yeah, because it means the murderer is among you. At the time of Beatrice's letter, the whole thing could be passed off as a prank set up by someone or another. However, if we're assuming that there's no 19th person, we can't ignore this anymore. In other words,
19人目がいないなら親父たちを殺した犯人も18人の中にいるってことになっちまうじゃないですか。
that would be the
つまり
assumption.
今この屋敷にいる誰かが殺したってことになる。
Aunt Ava smiled meaningfully. It looked like she thought this conclusion should have been obvious from the very beginning.
犯人は倉庫の中に6人の遺体を運び込んだわ。
Well, at least we know it wasn't Maria then.
でもよく倉庫の中に運び込めたわよね。
I mean, who's got the strength to do that? Battler George, Goda is dead. People who aren't dead. I would say Battler George and Genji, probably. I don't know how strong Cannon is. Maybe he could too. Nanjo, probably not. I don't know.
あのシャッターは常に閉められていて施錠されていたそうよ。
That makes Genji look even more suspicious because they walked in and out of the the staff room to get the key.
つまり倉庫内に運び込むにはシャッターの施錠を開ける必要があった。
I don't even think George knew about the storehouse.
わかる？
たまたまその日シャッターが開けっぱなしになってた可能性は？
使用人たちは常に閉めていると言ってたわ。つまり鍵を使用人室から持ち出さなくては倉庫は絶対に開けられない。
鍵は使用人室の一つしかないんすかね？
源氏さんはそうだと言ってるわ。
Yeah, he did.
ということは犯人はそのたった一つの倉庫の鍵のありかを知っていて持ち出した。さっきカノン君が使用人室に鍵を戻すところを見たわ。壁にびっしりと鍵がかけられていて、とても素人にはどこに何がかけてあるのかわからなかった。
Giving more credence to one of the butlers.
犯人はその中から倉庫の鍵を見事選び出したのよ。しかも札も何もついていない鍵を手にしてバラ庭園裏にある倉庫の鍵だと理解した。
In other words,
つい
they've
で
used
に
it
言
a
う
lot.
と倉庫の場所すら理解していた。
Yeah.
もっとはっきり断言するわ。犯人は使用人室の内部にも熟知している。
She can say it out loud now because none of them are in the room. They're all searching for Kinza. Her argument was extremely plain and clear. If the bodies had been found thrown somewhere in the bushes of the rose garden, there wouldn't have been much to go on. However, if there was only one key to the storehouse in the servant room, and it was stored with such a large group of keys, a novice would not be able to tell them apart. This meant the culprit was someone who went into the servant room a lot and was familiar with the locations of the keys. The family members didn't normally go into the servant room, which meant that...
ってことは使用人の誰かが犯人。
I mean, that's usually the most obvious answer in these kinds of stories are not...
悪いけどそれ以
It's
上
not
お
what
ば
it
さんに言
really
えないわよ。
is.
でも一つだけ教えられることがある。
It would seem that it's one of the staff.
なんすか？
犯人たちは複数で、そして十分な武装をしていたと考えられる。
Why do you think there's more than
だってそう
one?
でしょ？食堂にいた兄さんたち4人を一度に襲って殺し、合計6人分の遺体をようようとバラ庭園の向こうの倉庫まで運んで悪趣味な化粧と落書きを施している。 これだけのことを単独犯で行えるはずもないで
There
し
was
ょ
a。bit of a point there. Ah, the words that went beyond the box got stuck on the bottom. It made sense. It probably would have been possible for a single person with enough time, but it would take so incredibly long. It was probably safe to assume that a significant number of people were involved. Okay, well, if we're sticking to the 18-person theory, you know, you say a significant number, suddenly you're getting to like a large percentage of the people that are remaining.
ひゅーってことはエヴァおばさんは使用人の人たちがみんなグルだろって言ってんすか？
I mean, 2 of the servants were killed.
静かになさいな。
I really don't think Goda and Cannon just teamed up and murdered
憶
everyone.
測で言っちゃ悪いわよ。
Cannon was the one that found everything. I mean, of course, it could have been an act, the way he acted when he showed up, but
それにもし本当にそうだったらどうするつもり？
well, okay, hang on. Because there was that one conversation with Goda and Canon where they were talking about, like, oh, the ceremony's beginning again. Beatrice is coming back. It's time. That's very suspicious. Hmm.
彼らは私たちを生かして返さないでしょうね。しかも兄さんたち4人をやすやすと殺した相手なのよ。
If that were, well,
今この部屋に残っていてまともに戦えそうな人間はうちの家族の3人にせいぜいバトラ君で4人ってところ。
if you just assume they were murderers out to get you, I'm fairly certain the fact that they took everyone else on means that they could probably take care of the remaining people no problem. But obviously we know about, you know, the 6 sacrifices and that we've already hit that number for the day, and there probably won't be any more killings until the next day. I mean, unless this doesn't even really imply that anyone's going to be killed until the 4th twilight. Noble name. I know we don't know Canon's real name. Although the Shidamiyas, obviously, some of them think of themselves as very important and noble, and I don't know. Sorry, my thoughts are really, like, disjointed right now and sporadic. I'm just kind of thinking to myself here.
状況は昨晩と何も変わらない。つまり犯人にとって残る私たちを皆殺しにするなんて簡単なことなのよ。
It's not going to happen, but they don't know that. I've been playing detective with Aunt Ava, trying to expose the person who killed Dad and the rest before the police did. If only I could cleverly penetrate the culprit's identity and stick the proof in their face. I'd been so sure that, just like one of those detective movies, the culprit would then give up and surrender. However, the culprit would only surrender if there was no way for them to fight back. The culprits behind the crime on this island were far from helpless. And might even be able to massacre all of the remaining people here. Very much so. I mean, if they could do what they did before, I'm sure they'd have the power to do that. And on top of that, this island was like a giant closed room cut off from the outside world by the typhoon. So they had a full day, until tomorrow, to kill, scheme, and camouflage themselves. In short, it wasn't a safe atmosphere where we could get very far by playing detective. To the contrary, we were at a stage where we had to be scared stiff, since playing detective might displease the culprits, and cause them to commit another mass murder.
あくまでも可能性の問題よ。でも私は使用人の人たちをまだ信用できないわね。それに私は使用人だけを疑ってるわけじゃないわ。さらに黒幕がいるかもしれないと思ってるわよ。
I mean, from your point of view, Kinzo would be the obvious guess, right? The one in charge of the servants.
どうしてですか？
勘よ。使用人は書いて字のごとし、誰かに使用されて手足となる存在よ。
It's funny you say, well... Oh, there's no arm here, just leg.
殺されたのは後宮家の親族ばかり。なら その結果で利害が発生する人間が関わるのは当然。
This was also plain and clear. The Yoshitamiya family had been right in the middle of discussions about how to distribute the inheritance when grandfather died. If this case follows the standard form of any classic mystery novel, the crime was definitely caused by someone with ties to the Yoshitamiya family and who was involved in the inheritance problem. I mean, you're starting to point the finger at yourself here, Ava. Aunt Ava had probably read a few books in that genre herself. Her argument may have had a few blind assumptions in it, but it was a standard conclusion that anyone might have reached. I think most people would end up suspecting the servants, even if they used different reasoning to get there. Especially the story about the key to the shutter. That made it very easy to suspect that one of the servants was involved.
だからなぜか気に入らねえんすよね。
気に入らないって？何の話？
あ、いえいえ、こっちの話っす。
I tried to dodge her question by joking, but I couldn't erase the sense of unease welling up inside me. After all, her conclusion was such an easy one to reach, a conclusion that anyone could reach, and I just couldn't be satisfied with that. If I tried spinning the chessboard around, like I learned from Kaori-san, this was exactly why a servant couldn't possibly be the culprit. Oh? If the servants really were the culprits, they wouldn't hide the bodies in a place connected to themselves. Why on earth would they use the rose garden shed if they were the ones in charge of the key that could unlock it? The police would probably immediately pursue whoever had been in control of the key. It was even possible that some other facts might come to light as a result. The more we think of the servants as the culprits, the less reason they had to carry the bodies into the storehouse. But what if they knew we'd think that, and put the corpses in the storehouse for that very reason? No, that's completely impossible. When the police come and inspect the scene of the crime, they'll probably be able to uncover many things. No matter how carefully the culprits carried out that murder, some traces will definitely be found. In other words, they had everything to lose and nothing to gain. If you think about it this way and look at this murder game from the culprit's side, it's hard to imagine why they'd want to call attention to the corpses. Once the corpses were found, it could result in someone sending a report to the police, or it might make the remaining people more cautious, or it might make the survivors start to search for the culprit. None of these things would make life any easier for the culprit. It's just like the words of the main character's mother in a novel I read recently, called Higarashi no Naku Koro ni. Wait, it's a book in this world? I was under the impression that they shared like the same universe. Higarashi no Naku Koro ni. What? Huh. I have not read Higurashi. I plan to someday, maybe after this one, but this is my first When They Cry experience. Every story needs to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. Eliminating that beginning is essential for the perfect crime. Right now, we don't know where Grandfather is. We don't know if he's already become a victim or if he's one of the culprits. But this state of confusion must be beneficial to the killer. The culprit has absolutely nothing to gain by showing us the bodies in such an obvious way and making us all realize there's been a murder. In fact, this is the perfect place to spin the chessboard around. In other words, showing us the corpses in such a flashy way must be the culprit's goal in and of itself. So at the very least, to the culprit, the appearance of 6 corpses there meant more than the deaths themselves. In other words, the culprit wanted this murder on display. To whom? To us. This is a message. The culprit's trying to shove something in our faces. I don't know what it is. At this point in time, this vulgar mass murder isn't making me feel anything except the malice directed towards all of us. Malice towards all of us. Is it? Each one of the survivors has some kind of connection to the 6 victims. Uncle Krause's death brought Jessica the grief of losing a family member. The deaths of Dad and Kitty-san brought me sorrow, while Aunt Rosa's death brought Maria sorrow. Well, we haven't seen that sorrow yet, that's for sure. Goda-san's death probably shocked his fellow servants, and Shannon-chan's death brought grief to both George Aniki, who had proposed to her, and Cannon-kun, who had loved her like an older sister. I mean, we didn't mention Hideyoshi or on Ava in this list of people who have sorrow now. Everyone now on this island has received an equal amount of sadness. What about Hideyoshi and Ava? Oh, Aunt Ava was sure that the servants were in cahoots, but then how could you explain the deaths of Goda-san and Shannon-chan? Yeah. At any rate, by this argument, the grief caused by the 6 deaths hit everyone but Aunt Ava and Uncle Hideyoshi. Exactly. Aunt Ava, who had directed suspicion at the servants and acted as though she herself was beyond suspicion, could not be ruled out as a suspect. In the first place, she was able to argue that the servants were suspicious by focusing on the shutter's key. But if you look at it from a perspective of motive and who would gain, Aunt Ava's name rises to the top of the list. She's eliminated all the other siblings. I say she's eliminated like she's the culprit, but I mean all the other siblings are eliminated. Uh-huh.
嫌だな。内緒にしててくださいよ。あんなことやこんなことで頭をいっぱいにしてたなんて。
She knows, Battler.
私がこの殺人で一番得をする。どうせ疑われるだろうから先に自己申告しておくわ。
I tried to dodge the issue by joking around, but apparently it didn't work.
遺産は兄弟の数で分割する。でも今や4兄弟は私一人。後宮家の全財産はすべて私のものになるの。
Even if you're not the culprit, I'm sure you're just loving this.
秀吉おじさんが聞いたら予算か言えばシャレにならんっていうところっすね。
ごめんね。どう取り繕ったってどうせ疑われるだろうからふざけただけよ。だからこの殺人は私の立場から見れば私を疑わせるためのものではないかと思ってるの。
I mean, trying to say they picked those 6 people just so it would look like you're the culprit because you stand the most to gain. I could see that.
困ったことに昨べのアリバイは弱いわ。
聞かせてもらってもいいっすか。昨べのことを。
バトラ君たちも知っている通り、兄弟が遺産をどう食いちぎり合うかという話し合いは深夜まで続いたわ。
Slice up and eat the inheritance, huh?
でも何時まで続いたかは知らない。私と主人は朝が早かったからね。もう眠くて24時を過ぎたあたりで抜けさせてもらったの。そしてゲストハウスに戻って休んだわ。
それを秀吉おじさん以外の誰かに証明できるっすか。 いやいや、別にエヴァおばさんを疑ってるわけじゃないっすよ。
It's not like I suspect you, but I totally suspect you.
あら、どうだか。証明になるかわからないけれど、ゲストハウスに戻ってきた時、源氏さんに出迎えを受けてタオルはいるかと聞かれたわ。
Okay.
だから私たちがゲストハウスに戻ってきた時間は24時過ぎだと証明してくれると思うわよ。もっとも私の仮説通り使用人たちもグルなのだとしたらこんなのアリバイにならないけどね。
確かにそうっすね。ってことは、俺、今、真犯人と推理ごっこをしてるってことになるんすか？
でも私の名誉のために言わせてもらうけど、遺産目当てだったならこんな変な殺人はしないわよ。だって遺産相続権を喪失させるだけならどんな死に方だって構わない。
Really? If I really wanted the inheritance, I'd just kill him. I wouldn't do it so bizarrely. I'd just murder the bitches. What?
むしろ事故死に見せかけた方がスマートでしょ。使用人たちを抱き込んで周到に計画していたならなおさらそうするでしょうよ。
Unless you purposely made it look bizarre so that it didn't look cold and calculated as you would do,
確かに、そうっすね。
so that you could say, now,
それは常に殺人に見せるべきではない。
they can't be my murders. I wouldn't murder so strangely like that.
そういうことよ。だからおばさんは今からとてもブルーな気持ちなわけ。
Bidoo?
警察には黒幕扱いされて散々調べられるでしょうね。
Aunt Ava shrugged with a bitter smile. It was just as easy to suspect Aunt Ava as it was to suspect the servants. So if we spin the chessboard around, does that make it impossible for the culprit to be her, suspicious as she is? However, if that sort of argument always works, then motive can never help us in any way. No, that can't be right. Knowing the motive must give us powerful clues towards knowing the culprit. That's why murderers from all time periods disguise crimes in complicated ways, cleverly preventing their motives from being discovered. I don't get it. I just don't get it. Every time I spin the chessboard around, it keeps flipping from front to back and back to front. Are my thoughts bringing me closer to the truth? Or are they... Are you worried you're overcomplicating things? Let's see. Let me check this real quick. $15 and... Okay, yeah. I think we will call that, as that is a good stopping point. And end it here. So this is kind of what I was thinking we would get from the start of the game. Was very much some big murder mystery vibes to it. You know, you got the murder, suddenly you're playing detective, trying to figure out who did it, getting all your clues, your alibis, considering all the suspects, motives. It's definitely like what I most expected from this game, from what little I knew about it. It's just like the picture I had in my head of what the game would be like. But we're only in, episode 1. So, I can't imagine it's going to keep this up and be like this for long, because there's still so much to this game. So many tens and tens of hours. that I don't know. There's obviously going to be some curveballs and some changes to the game here, and I have no idea what those will be. We'll see. We will see. All right. Thank you all for watching, and I will catch you in the next episode.